Beetlejuice is really just an interior design style fight. When you forget Michael Keaton's insane improvisation, all the confusing rules for the recently deceased, the real conflict is that the previous owner of a home, Barbara, doesn't like how the new owner, Delia, wants to gut it out and make it her own. Hi, my name is Anne, and I'm an interior architect and designer. Here we're having fun sampling from the screen to style our spaces like our favorite characters would. So today, in honor of the Beetlejuice sequel coming out this week, we are looking at the Winter River home shared begrudgingly by Barbara and Adam Maitland and Delia, Charles, and Lydia Dietz. So typically if you Google Beetlejuice-inspired interior design, you find something like this or like this. Oof, but these stark black and white vertical stripes are pretty visually jarring to completely cover a space in, and they really pull more from Beetlejuice's most iconic outfit than any of the style choices that Barbara and Delia are making. Today, we are looking at the characters' real style selections for their shared home and where we might pull some fun inspiration, including how I've actually brought the black and white stripes into my home as a feature, but softened in a way that feels dramatic and still livable. Here we see a shot of the original, seemingly traditional Maitland home with some cliche horror movie elements like the tall tower and the widow's walk. And then, with the help of her designer Otho, Delia transforms the exterior with a sort of postmodern deconstructionist take. Architectural elements are pulled out and emphasized with sharp angles, bright yellow beams, and an unnervingly unprotected porch extension. AD has a great video from an architect discussing this and other horror movie homes in a link in the description. So in keeping with the chronology of the movie, let's start with Barbara and Adam's original design, and then move on to Delia's more edgy and iconic style. So if Delia is more your speed, feel free to skip ahead. So here's a quick overview of the spaces we are going to bring to life in a new way today, with real product links in the description. Barbara's cozy farmhouse kitchen and her pattern-filled bedroom, and Delia's severe, but mostly sophisticated, dining and living rooms. I'll explain areas where I borrowed ideas more directly, and areas where I refined as I felt fit to make the space either more livable or just more attractive. And at the end, I'll show the areas of my home where I incorporated a similar aesthetic, more Delia than Barbara, without any big investment. Gina Davis is so perfect for the role of Barbara Maitland, who's just so sweet and delighted to install the same floral wallpaper in every room of her home in slightly different colorways. She has no interest in painting over the original wood trim or changing anything about the structure of the home other than adding her own sentimental touches. So I'm calling her style earnest farmhouse, in that she truly loves more historical elements and patterns, and she embraces those whimsical and romantic colors rather than the faux modern farmhouse, black and white, that just wipes out anything messy or kitschy or colorful. It's her own version of hell to watch the new owners not only ridicule, but also gut out and deconstruct their traditional home. Here we see Barbara working in her kitchen, which immediately conveys a lived-in, relaxed vibe with some traditional elements like checkerboard tile, glass front cabinets, and then nothing's perfect, nothing's hidden away. It's just all sentimental, out there to see. And in recent years, it's more commonplace to see a light neutral on the walls and then a color on the cabinets. So I actually think this is a really nice inversion and something unexpected from what we see nowadays, to put the color on the walls. She has a soft white on the cabinets, which is really pretty. She just has the hardware painted to match the cabinets, so it's different than Delia's more strong metallic elements. And then otherwise, it's a pretty traditional farmhouse look with a butcher block countertop, some floral curtains, the checkerboard backsplash, a plaid-like rug, and just a collection of objects on the walls and basically every available surface. And they also have a farmhouse table in the middle of the kitchen instead of the island that Delia does. So in styling a kitchen inspired by Barbara, I created this sketch that I think is timeless while still honoring some traditional farmhouse elements in a way that feels fresh and welcoming. First, I totally like the idea of a table in the kitchen. I did this in one of my old apartments, and I liked how cozy it felt. There are farmhouse tables available like this one from Wayfair with the same painted leg look, although of course you could go to an antique shop or a vintage store and find something similar. And then instead of getting too matchy, I added these retro-looking metal and vinyl chairs. These are actually rated for outside use, which is perfect for a possibly messy kitchen. In one shot in the movie, you see a chair like these, although otherwise they had a collection of mismatched traditional wooden chairs. So I decided to stick with these ones that are a little bit different just because the juxtaposition's a bit more interesting. And then I love this pendant as a contemporary take on the one hanging over Barbara's sink, still with some scalloped edging, but a more contemporary shape and mix of materials. Then where Barbara had a two-tone checkerboard tile backsplash, I introduced a third greener color, which adds a bit more vibrancy and interest without compromising on the traditional warm feel. I chose Headspace from Claire Paint for the walls, which is a really beautiful and modern take on a soft minty blue, and Sherwin-Williams Greek Villa for the warm off-white cabinets. Although Barbara had a blue floral pattern on short window curtains, I think a Roman shade in a muted floral pattern is both more functional and more contemporary feeling for a kitchen window. I love the charm of the turned legs on this wood stool from Studio McGee. Plus, it's flat on one side, which makes it perfect for tucking out of the way in a small kitchen space. A stool is great to have for extra seating or storage without making a heavy investment. Barbara has a small rug at the sink, but I thought we could make more of a statement with a similar aesthetic rug, but in some deeper colors and larger, situated under the table. If you want to create an eclectic gallery wall, Framebridge has some great new matting options like this burgundy striped mat and gold frame. We're kind of replicating the red of the phone that Barbara has hanging up because probably you don't have a phone hanging on your wall anymore. Definitely shopping vintage would make sense if you want to stay as true to possible for that casual collected look with different framed pieces. I also love the functionality offered by the wall drawers that the Maitlands have by their back door. I found this one from Wayfair that's actually intended as a nightstand, but I love the idea to hang it higher on the wall and use it for stuff like papers and mail that you need to maintain but don't want to see all the time or lose among all the other counter clutter. Then I'm showing some ceramic options for displaying in those glass cabinets. I like the reddish text on these Ralph Lauren mugs, and this set of Martha Stewart mixing bowls add another touch of mint instead of just sticking to all neutrals and dishware. And finally, some tea towels that are a nod to Barbara's curtains without getting quite so fussy, and of course these can be changed at all of the time for a different accent. So here's a shot of the original and then the newly inspired kitchen. I think it's cute, right? Super doable and warm while still feeling fresh. So now let's move on to the bedroom. So honestly, in rewatching the movie, I started to get confused about the time period because it almost feels as if the Maitlands are from the 50s or 60s or something, based on their style, the music they listen to, and just their overall vibe. But then with this jump scare, actual villain of the movie, the real estate agent / possible designer, Jane Butterfield, I remembered the Dietzes move in very quickly after the Maitlands' passing because they bought the home from Jane. So then I realized Barbara isn't a 50s or 60s girl. She's a peak 80s Laura Ashley girl. So Laura Ashley was and is quintessentially British, demure, floral countryside. It's pretty pristine and Victorian inspired. So I know about Laura Ashley because my mom was a Laura Ashley girl. You can see in these old photos, she had striped wallpaper, lacy curtains, floral curtains. She dressed me and my sister in these coordinating Laura Ashley dresses. So in Barbara's bedroom, you see that influence with the floral wallpaper. Here it's in more of a peach palette, the traditional table lamps, a canopy bed, and layers of patterns between the sheets and the comforter and quilt. The mismatched table lamps give a sort of English cottage vibe, relaxed feel, along with the collection of framed photos and prints on the fireplace mantle. Every surface that can has something on it, books, plants, knickknacks, in contrast to Delia's lack of most decor. Here, in my updated take on Barbara's bedroom, one of the bigger changes I made was to select a contemporary floral wallpaper that matches the color trim instead of contrasting like Barbara had. Doing a more cohesive color to the room's envelope is a bit more chic in creating a tonal look. This wallpaper from Chasing Paper is great because it is removable, so you can experiment a bit more. I also selected a canopy bed like Barbara had, but with a much lower profile because I think that helps keep the room feeling more open and fresh. The trim paint is the same Headspace paint from Claire because it instantly makes your home feel more cohesive and designed to repeat the same color from one space to another. The nightstands from Pottery Barn give that good open and closed storage, while I found some mismatched but similar lamps from Ralph Lauren to give that sophisticated but relaxed feel. I would definitely recommend sourcing antique lamps from a vintage shop where you could also choose your own shade. I do like this rippled shade look that softens the vibe a bit from the more flat shades you tend to see today. Then I found a more minimal take on a paneled mirror and some brass sconces that reference a traditional candle sconce, but with more minimal forms. These would cast a really nice, soft ambient light in a bedroom. I also love the idea of a deep gray blue for the sheets instead of just plain white. These from Ball and Branch has some pretty floral patterning like the Maitlands. And this quilt from Rifle Paper Co. has more modern, deep colors and a geometric pattern rather than the traditional large floral pattern the Maitlands had. And I found these framed prints from a traditional Laura Ashley wallpaper. Ironically, I love the hand-drawn feel and touch of red to them. I'm also showing hanging them vertically, which is an easy way to add some height to a smaller room. So overall, the tonal blue envelope and those rich wood tones really create a contemporary, chic bedroom, while those traditional touches keep the warmth and charm that Barbara had. And now we move on to Delia. Foregoing the traditional wood millwork and paneling in favor of faux stone finishes and high contrast elements, Delia creates the somewhat stark atmosphere that Lydia despises. But I would argue when you separate out some of those components, we actually can pull some high style elements out if you're looking to add some dramatic moments in your own home without feeling like you're living in a horror movie set. So I'm calling Delia's style, in contrast to Barbara's, severe chic. The looks Catherine O'Hara gives when she first sees the house are so perfect, and so she enlists her designer friend Otho to help with making the home more represent who she wants to be seen as, which is a cosmopolitan artist who just happens to be living in small-town New England. Okay, so let's look at Delia's dining room. Delia values the dining room as being a place to host guests rather than Barbara just having a table in her kitchen, and so that plays into the style decisions that she makes. She has a really large, dramatic stone dining table with rough cut edges, accented by very high backed metal chairs. You can tell how high they are when Catherine O'Hara is standing next to it during that iconic scene. So it's hard to imagine guests feeling very comfortable, but I think some of the minimalism is intentional because she's trying to showcase her art at the end of the room. With some of the faux tackiness of the 80s, Delia does have this wallpaper in a faux sort of paneling, and the color is this almost acid wash teal that is a bit nauseating for a dining room. I do love the pop of red with the area rug underneath, and I really love the idea of floor lamps along the perimeter instead of just overhead lighting or wall sconces. I think that nice upward glow is great for dining instead of having something that feels almost like a heat lamp over your head. And then I think the accessorizing is really pretty with the all black table settings, the modern clock, and the sculptural objects. Okay, so here is my Delia-inspired dining room sketch. I softened some of the individual components while keeping the overall dramatic feel for entertaining. I love Etsy, and I found this wonderful modern version of Delia's dining table in a concrete finish with an angular base. I think the warm ivory tone available really softens the look, while still keeping that rough around the edges vibe. And I selected a bit softer look for the dining chairs, still with a slightly higher back than normal, but in a light wood with black leather. The tailored details on this chair are so sophisticated and still give that dramatic effect from any angle. I especially like the cutouts and hardware you can see from the back. I think the fireplace in the Dietz's dining room provides a really nice opportunity for display, but you could do the same thing with a wall-mounted ledge like this simple black one I found. It gives a sort of anchor to a large, modern, all-black clock as well. I love how the simple black clock plays against the more intricate wallpaper instead of competing the way a detailed piece of art might. Then I found this flat weave rug that has a bit more pattern to it than Delia's to again soften the look a bit while still being super saturated. I like a rug under a dining table, but I would always make sure it's a flat weave like this one, so you don't have to worry about chairs getting stuck. Then I love this Kelly Wearstler wallpaper as a more atmospheric but still textural take on Delia's without some of the slightly nauseating texture. And again, I found these striking black floor lamps that give the same soft lighting around the perimeter of the room, but the shade softens the look a bit from the original, which felt a bit like a severely tall spider. Instead of a whole display room, this RH Modern glass front display cabinet could provide a nice opportunity for showing collectible objects or dishes. And I added these red handles like Delia had, because again, that pop of red just adds so much fun and warmth. There's actually this whole theory to it called the unexpected red theory that Ingrid Fattel-Lee gets into, and you can see those red handles behind Delia. I took a snap of this little red mushroom I have at my desk that just brings me all this joy when I see it every day. And then there's her quote talking about how it's something about the contrast of red in the rest of the space. It's just an unexpected moment of joy. So even though it could be seen in a horror movie to represent other things, I do still think there's validity. Even Barbara has touches of red in her decor. So the idea of buying an existing display cabinet but adding your own hardware is just a low investment way to make it your own. And then I found some black placemats, again from Etsy, black silverware, and a pretty black and white napkin from Anthropologie. Delia didn't have flowers on the table. You can actually see them in the background, and I think it's probably because she wanted to keep a clear view to her art. But I like the idea of having something sculptural in the middle of the table instead of a flower arrangement. I found these blue sculptural objects that add height and color without interrupting anyone's view. Of course, this is again something you definitely could find from an antique shop to get something really unique. So here's the side-by-side of Delia's original dining room and my new sketch. I really like how the deep red rug pops against that cooler green-blue of the walls, and the rest of the room is more subtle contrast of kind of ivory, white tones, and black. Overall, I think it's just really fun and pretty look for hosting dinner parties. So now we move into the living room. This whole living room arrangement foregoes the traditional rectilinear grouping in favor of an arrangement on top of an angular rug. I actually really like the idea of disrupting that traditional rectangular rug and then 2 chairs here and a sofa here. So I think starting with something irregular in shape can really open you up to new possibilities. Also, the furniture is a little sparse in Delia's living room, which I think is because it was intended more for hosting. So what I'm calling a living room in my sketch is really kind of more like an entertaining space than that cozy family room that you get watching TV in every night. I found this sort of intersecting hexagonal rug, which helps provide a new way to arrange the furniture, placing this angular bench on one side with 2 armchairs opposite, and then the side tables can be kind of loose and moved about as appropriate for hosting. This bench is beautiful with the intersecting planes of wood instead of the heavy metal of Delia's bench. Their living room has a squared armchair covered in a cow print. I think it's supposed to show they're trying to control and take advantage of the natural environment. So instead of a cow print, I think you can still get that interesting effect with a high contrast 2-tone armchair like this one from Interior Define. And I love, after all the gallery walls of the past 5 to 10 years, the idea of having one large singular piece of art. Delia's is a bit more grotesque, but Tappan has some really beautiful original pieces and prints that are large enough in scale that's enough of a presence that you truly don't need any more art in the room. This one is 74 by 40 inches. I think this Sherwin-Williams silver plate color is such a nice, softer, but still slightly icy, warm gray to completely cover the room in. In this sort of funny nod to the original, Delia does keep green on the fireplace, but in a sort of faux metal finish instead of Barbara's more traditional green square tiles. While you could source a similar metal, I think just painting the fireplace in this vintage vessel color creates as much of an appealing contrast from the gray walls. While Delia had a large, curvy red bar with seating, I think adding a smaller touch of red with a console table is the perfect unexpected pop next to the fireplace. The lines of the chinoiserie-inspired table echo the sort of lifelike feel to a lot of Delia's pieces and soften the look with a bit more of a collected or eclectic feel. Then for more flexibility, I found this metal and glass bar cart with wheels, which can be easily moved around for guests and brings those intersecting lines up to eye level. I think this Regina Andrew wall sconce has a beautiful sculptural feel with an elegant silhouette that isn't as imposing or heavy as Delia's sconces. I did render it in a silver finish to blend in more with the walls because I liked that element of her design. Side tables are always an opportunity to have a bit more fun, and these two have those contrasting amorphous and angular lines, with the blue glass being a nod to the blue glass blocks in Delia's dining room. I love the dynamic feel to this floor lamp, similar to Delia's next to the bench, although much more streamlined and light feeling. I think some graphic throw pillows could add color and interest, and then this magazine rack is an opportunity to add another pop of red at the floor level. And finally, this vase makes a nod to the deconstructionist approach Delia and Otho took to the exterior of the home, and some black and white cocktail napkins tie into the dining room table settings. Overall, this living room captures Delia's intent that they have a sophisticated and stylish space to host guests, while feeling a bit softer and I think more beautiful too. It almost reminds me of a French apartment, the way you have the molding painted out the same everywhere. Okay, so I promised in the beginning that I was going to show how I've incorporated some of those iconic black and white stripes in my home design, but in a much softer way than the sort of jarring all over stark black and white stripes you see here. It's funny because by the end of the movie, Delia herself is even inspired by that iconic suit, but in a softer way, with this gray and black, more patterned striped blouse that she's wearing. So my house is actually from the 50s. It's a mid-century home, which typically has a lot of wood detailing. You can see here there's wood trim, there's wood in the railings to the dining room, and then there's this wood paneling behind the fireplace. So I think it stayed that way for years and years, and then the most recent owners wanted to make it brighter, which is pretty typical. So they painted everything out in terms of the trim white, and then they painted the wood detailing behind the fireplace the same beige color as the walls. I wanted to make a bit more of a feature out of it, so I thought doing a stripe would be interesting, but I didn't want it to feel too harsh, particularly because it's a small room, it could overtake everything. So following the actual graining of the wood itself, there were these ridges. So between the larger black stripes and I did off-white stripes, there was an opportunity to do some color. So I did this sort of denim blue and deep tan. And I think creating a bit of a boundary between the darkest and lightest color makes it feel a bit softer, and the color is fun. So overall, we really love it. It does create quite a feature in our living room without competing with anything. I do eventually want to change the rug because I don't love the two together, but that's how things go, right? So I break down the colors that I used. They're all from Sherwin-Williams, except the off-white is this clear paint that called No Filter that I've used literally everywhere in my house, including the stripes behind me here. Okay, so the other design decision of Delia's that we haven't touched on is this pattern tile that they install in the entry rather than just having the wood flooring continuing throughout. It really creates more of an experience in that entry space, something to greet guests when they walk in. And I think it's a little bit harsher than maybe most people would want in their entry, but I did find this similarly patterned tile from Nemo Tile. The colors are a little bit softer, the scale and the overall patterning is a little softer while still being, dynamic and angular and really fun. So I do think that's a beautiful option if you can do tile in your home. It doesn't make sense in our entry. We have this very dull 12-inch by 12-inch bland brown tile in our kitchen that I'd love to take out one day, but it just doesn't make sense right now. So what I did find was this rug from Ruggable with their collaboration with Justina Blakeney. I love everything she does. I think the patterning is just as dynamic in terms of the shapes and the color contrast, but the colors are a little more earth toned, which fits the design that I'm going for a bit more. It's in a 3x5 size. It has a soft cushion. It's just really functional for the kitchen, but also helps cover up some of that brown that I don't want to see so much. So that's just one example of how you can take something like a tile inspiration and then find an area rug and create a lot of the same effect for much less cost and time investment. So there you have it. There you can see how Beetlejuice has inspired some elements in my own home and how you could incorporate some design inspiration from Barbara and Delia in some of your spaces as well. I'm excited to see the sequel coming out Friday. I wonder if interiors may or may not play into any of the drama this time. But let me know which screen space you'd like to see next, and thank you so much for watching my very first video. I'm sure I am missing a ton of knowledge in terms of all the technical stuff and whatever, but I really appreciate it if you stuck around till now, and thank you so much. See you next time.